Welcome to Time to Teach with Tammy, the podcast that gives tips, advice, and suggestions to teachers by a real teacher. So sit back and enjoy. And oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe. Welcome back, and we have made it to episode 10, which is somewhat crazy to me because I remember, and it was not too long ago, just setting up and starting this whole podcast journey. So to be here at episode 10 feels really amazing. Today's episode is entitled, It's Time to Worry, literally. So excited for today's episode because it's also the last in our Fast Forward series. That's right. This is the last one. This whole series we have been talking about different things to help you get ready for the fall. So I really hope that you've been following along and doing these things, because if you have, it is going to help lighten your load come the brand new school year. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that I'd like to talk about is an idea that is also new to me, so I'm going to be starting this year as well. But it's basically going through, as I've said in the past, I'm very into positive psychology, so this kind of came about in an article that I was reading, and it talks about designating a specific time to worry, which I think is so excellent, because this, I know, is something that I will do. I can worry about things and worry about things and worry about the same things yet again. Sometimes when it's just the act of worrying, and it's not even the thing itself, it's just you give this thing so much power. You go over it 100 different scenarios in your head, and you build it up to the point where it's almost debilitating. I know I am not the only one out there who does that, so I know there are many others out there too. And I think it's just something that is very common. We live in a world that demands so much of us, and especially in this profession of teaching, it's a very high demanding career. So we've got a lot on our plate, which also implies that we have a lot of stresses. So I really like this idea of designating a time to worry instead of going over a million times before you go to sleep, or as you're trying to go to sleep, or during the workday when maybe you really can't tackle it. Designate a time that you are going to think about your worries and confront them head on. So I'd actually like to share a little bit of an article. There's a lot written on this, so you can look online and Google designated worry times. But I'm going to share one particular article that I found, and it's from a website called anxieties.com. And I just found so many useful tips, and I just think this is going to be such a great tool. And by starting this in the summer, you can really have the technique perfected by fall. So, it just goes into everything we've been doing this summer, trying to tackle things and get ourselves ready. But here is what the article says about the different steps in how you should approach designating a worry time. So it says, number 1, set aside 2 daily worry times of 10 minutes each. I don't know. I'm not an expert on this. Obviously, they're recommending 2 times. I'm going to start with 1 time. I think starting 1 time is going to be sufficient for me. And then if I feel like I need to designate the 2 times, then I'll do that. So I think probably the best way to go about it is just thinking about how prone you are to worrying and how much time are you going to need. But yes, it does say 2 times and 10 minutes each. So 10 minutes is not a whole lot of time. So definitely, if you need more time, schedule it in. Number 2, spend this entire time thinking about only your worries regarding one issue. And it talks about the idea that you can talk into a tape recorder or some kind of form for you to process your worries. So I would say, maybe if it's not speaking to a tape recorder, if it's writing, or so many different apps have you do voice to text. So if you want to voice it into a document, I think that's another way you could do that as well. Number 3, do not think about any positive alternatives, which is interesting, only the negative ones. And do not convince yourself that your worries are irrational. So we're just thinking about all these negative thoughts. You're keeping your focus on that. And it'll kind of go into explain why that is in a minute. Attempt to become as anxious as possible while worrying. So if you think about how anxious you typically get through your worries, you're wanting to kind of work yourself up during this time. Continue to the end, this is number 5, continue to the end of each worry period, even if you run out of ideas and have to repeat the same worries over again. And then number 6, at the end of 10 minutes, let go of those worries with some calming breaths, then return to other activities. So I love this. I love this suggestion that you're taking the time and really working yourself up as much as you would during any time during the day, but with the understanding that you only have the 10 minutes. Once the 10 minutes is over, then you come back down, you breathe, you're calming yourself out. You've already been worked up. So it's not going to just come at you again. You have already experienced those emotions. And it's like, even though you're not necessarily getting rid of the anxiety because you're still experiencing those emotions, you're now taking control of when those emotions you're going to experience those emotions, as opposed to those emotions taking control over you. Now, this particular article does have a few suggestions in how you might want to manage the times and how you actually designate it. So it says, as a suggestion, you might choose your first time if you're in fact going to do more than one time. But you might choose your first time to be in the morning before you're off to work. Okay, so before you even go to school, before you have started your day, you're going to take your 10 minutes. This is just a suggestion if the morning works for you. It says you want to sit down, you want to find a private place, and you are going to pay very close attention to your worries. So your whole focus is really on your worry. So then your second time, if you're choosing a second time, could be at the end of the day. So you might start one time before school and then another time might be after school. And I think for sure for me, after school is definitely going to work, but again, I'm going to play around with this. But so after school, maybe it's as soon as you get home. Again, you're going to repeat finding a private place, a quiet place, sitting down, and designating 10 minutes where your full attention is on your worries. So I'm going to read this next paragraph. It says, when you sit down for the special time, totally devoted to your worries, follow these guidelines. Spend the entire time thinking only of your worries about this topic. Okay, so again, you're not thinking anything positive, which sounds a little counterintuitive. It sounds like advice that is pretty opposite to what we hear a lot, like keep it positive, focus on the bright side. But you have to keep in mind what the purpose of this 10 minutes is. Do not try to convince yourself that these worries are unnecessary. Do not try to see the positive side or argue in any way whatsoever. So you're just thinking about the negative thoughts. That's what you're focusing on, and you're letting those thoughts continue for the 10 minutes. Okay? As many that pertain to that topic. Every angle and aspect of your worries and fears, just let them come up in your mind and continue to look for more of them and try to become as uncomfortable as possible as you review these thoughts. So again, it sounds very counterintuitive, but we're working ourselves up because we're only getting those 10 minutes, right? That's the time that is allotted. So continuing with the article, if after a while you run out of worries, recycle the worries you have already stated. Go back to the first ones and repeat them. Your goal is to spend the entire 10 minutes focused on your worries, even if you have to repeat them. It is not going to work if you say, well, 5 or 6 minutes have gone, I can't think of any more, so I'll stop today. You do not want to do that, because you really want to experience the frustration that comes with being able to worry about your worries and generate any new worries that might come along. Then it goes on to say that people who worry feel as if they worry all day long, but that's really not what happens. Their worries come in spurts. They argue themselves out of the worries. They reassure themselves that things will be okay. They tell themselves to be quiet, they get distracted, and then their worries also become quiet. But then, and I'm kind of summarizing some of this and putting in my own words, those worries are going to resurface over time. So as you can see, basically, according to this article, those worries really never quite go away because we're silencing them. We are pushing them away, but then we've never actually truly dealt with them. So of course they come back to us. Now the whole idea is that after you have done this for a while, your worries are actually going to start to decrease, which, sounds funny because you're actually spending intentional time thinking about the worries, but because you're tackling it, it causes those worries to not consume so much of your time, so you are going to decrease them. Now the article goes into a section about how exactly this works. Basically the idea is that you're kind of shifting your feelings and your emotions in terms of when you're confronting those problems. So when during your first few worry times that you've scheduled, you're probably going to feel obviously anxious. You're probably also going to feel upset at having those thoughts, and like we typically do when we get those thoughts, we're upset about it, we want to push them out. So just know that the article does caution us that we will probably very likely experience this the first few times that we have a designated worry time. So it makes sense because these are the things that are your worst fears, they are your biggest concern, so obviously they are going to bring up some negative emotions. So that makes sense. But after having done this for a few days, the article says that they tend to hear that people start to begin saying that they don't have enough worries to actually fill in their 10 minutes. So it kind of changes. They run out of ideas, or they run out of complaints, and then they stop feeling so anxious, and then consequently, because they've kind of run out of their worries, they've played over it so much, that they tend to get bored. So obviously boredom is never an enjoyable state, right? I mean, it's quite the opposite. But if you're comparing it to an anxious state of mind, boredom is preferable. So feeling bored from this exercise eventually tells you that you have made progress, and that is actually one of the goals of doing this exercise. You want to work over these problems so frequently that you've dealt with it, you've gotten out of your system, you've confronted it, and you've kind of changed your mindset and your feelings towards it. So it's no longer going to be a constant worry and a constant anxiety, and you're going to begin to experience other emotional responses. So when that happens, you know that you're approaching your goal with this. Okay, continuing to look a little bit more on some of the actual ways in which you can implement this in your daily life. So, according to the guidelines in this article, it says that you want to do this, like I said, at least twice a day. Again, I'm not going to start with twice because that's not my style. I like to start slowly and then add things on, but according to this article, it is recommended that you're doing at least twice. So the suggestion is that even possibly more. And again, I would just kind of gauge it based on your anxieties and the time that you feel you're going to need to actually tackle this. But one of the very big points that they make in the article is to make sure that as you're in your 10 minutes of worry time, that you really refrain from telling yourself, oh, this is a silly worry. I don't even know why I'm worried about this. This is no big deal. You don't want to do that. You want to embrace it, embrace all the negativity and any uncomfortable feelings or negative feelings, stressful feelings that come with that worry. You want to take this worry to the max. So don't push anything away. Don't tell yourself that it's not even worth worrying about, because it is going to be worth worrying about during those 10 minutes. But again, when the 10 minutes are up, that's when you want to take deep breaths. You want to just kind of release it from your body, release it from your mind, and you're going to move on until your next designated worry time. So it's really important that you find a way to transition from those 10 minutes and release it out of your body. So I really like their suggestion about the breathing out. I did an episode about mindfulness in the classroom and in your own personal life. And I do find those deep breaths, those calming breaths, really do help if you're trying to transition from one emotional state to another. And in case you didn't listen to that episode, and I believe it's one of my first ones, I want to say episode 2, but I could be wrong. In any case, I use mindfulness in the classroom, and whenever students are getting really, really hyper or excited because maybe there's a special event that day, maybe we're going on a field trip, which we do once a year, but for all other things that happen, whatever they're excited about, we know kids, they get excited rather easily. Anything that's different from the regular routine is exciting. So it's a way that I bring them back to the carpet and I say, okay, we're going to just practice some mindfulness right now. And of course, at the beginning of the school year, like everything else, this has to be taught to your students. They need to know what it looks like. They need to know what it sounds like. It's very quiet. Doesn't sound like anything. But they need to know that, and they need to know what to be doing with their thoughts. They need to know the purpose of why they're doing it. That's huge. In fact, I would start with the purpose with anything, but let them know why you're using it in the classroom, why it's worthy of their time. And then anytime you need to use that, it's going to be an excellent tool because it does help them to transition from an excited state of being, an emotional state of being, and just kind of, it lets them release that and then transition into a more calm and collected state. So I really like that in this article, that's also how they suggest that you release yourself from that 10-minute of designated worry time and then transition, deep breathing, even if you have to shake off anything to physically feel like you've released it from your body, whatever helps you, do that, and then you go back into whatever regular daily things you're doing at the time. Then you just go back to your normal life and you've dealt with the worries. So this also goes on to say, again, they're recommending twice a day, and at least, it should be scheduled at least 10 days consecutively. So make sure that you have, if you have something that is coming up, like maybe an upcoming event, maybe it's a presentation that you're giving, whatever is causing you anxiety, you want to make sure that you're planning this enough in advance to deal with that worry. So if I know I have this happening next month, I want to make sure that I've planned at least my 10 consecutive days far enough in advance to deal with that event or whatever it is that is causing me anxiety. So you can see how this is great, not just for those normal concerns and worries and anxieties that surface all the time, but when there's something special that's happening in your life that is causing you anxiety, that you can purposely add this in to deal with that event or that situation specifically. When I think about the beginning of the school year, I know it's much easier now for me to deal with the anxieties that come with the beginning of the school year, but I'm not perfect by any means, because actually my whole point of bringing this up is that the beginning of the school year really does cause a lot of anxiety for me, because I feel like it's such an unknown. There are so many unknowns at the beginning of the school year, aren't there? I mean, there are the normal things that you do regularly that you know what to expect. I know the stress of having to set up my classroom. I know that I'm going to be preparing for the first week. All the things that you know, but the specifics you don't. You haven't met your students. That right there causes anxiety. And it might be a misconception with students and parents, but we teachers also experience those anxieties of not knowing our students. We don't know them. Now it's time to do some relationship building, and that means work, and community building, that means work. The rest of the year I find is much easier. Even the end of the year with all its craziness, I prefer all of that to the beginning of the year, because there's so much that you do not know. And then you have all of these presentations coming up, or probably, in my case, my students are coming from the early childhood section. I've said in the past, I'm at a K through 12th grade school. So pre-first, the grade that I teach, is the very first grade in our elementary section. So this is a big deal. This is a huge deal. It's a high anxiety for our students. In fact, we have our counselor, our elementary counselor, who's out there the first day of school, and other teachers who help out, because there's so much anxiety, and you don't know, some years we get kids crying, they can't leave the parents, or when the parents are finally able to let go of them or get away from the classroom. We've had years where the kids just kind of go off and they're running looking for their parents. So it's just a lot of anxiety at the beginning of the school year. So, and then of course, you're preparing for open house or back to school, whatever it's called at your school. or maybe those are two separate things. Ours is open house. And actually the day before we start school, we pre-first teachers have a meeting with the parents, because the transition is so big that they need to know exactly what to expect now that they're at this new section. Well, not a new section, but new for them. They're in the elementary section. So all of this just kind of combines and ultimately really produces a lot of anxiety and worries during the beginning of the school year. So I am looking forward to using the strategy of the worry time to just deal specifically with these anxieties for the beginning of the school year. I think it's a great strategy. So how exactly does one go about implementing this? Well, the article provides 3 different ways that you can think about your worries or work with your worries during your worry time. The first one is just by yourself, and again, you're in a quiet, private room, and just silently, mentally repeating all of your worries. So that's just you, quiet by yourself, mentally going through your worries, thinking about it. And then the second way that you can do this is by speaking into a tape recorder, which, I don't know, do those even exist anymore? I don't know. I'm thinking of me as a podcaster. I would probably just not use a tape recorder, but just do it on my same audio program that I use. But that is what is suggested, is some kind of a recorder. And it does say that sometimes people might feel a little bit silly doing that, which I can relate to. I definitely can relate to that, because I know when I first started the first few episodes of podcasting, it felt very awkward to be sitting in a room talking to myself. Now by episode 10, not so much. I'm much more used to it, and it's also much less humiliating if my husband or daughter walk through, because they know that I'm in a room, in a closed room, talking to myself. Whereas first it was, even though they knew what was happening, it just felt very awkward to be walked in on when you're talking to yourself. So some people are uncomfortable with that. Then the third way you could do this is to actually have like a designated worry coach. So obviously this would be someone who you feel very, very comfortable with, because you're speaking your worries and concerns to your worry coach. So it's really important, if you are going to implement a worry coach, it's important that your worry coach actually knows what his or her role is and what is expected. So a worry coach basically is to do very little talking. Your job is to do most of the talking. In fact, the coach in that case, really the only time the coach is supposed to be speaking is to help kind of prompt you if you're stuck and you can't think of any more worries. So your coach might say something like, say more about being worried, or what else about this topic might worry you, or what other topics worry you when you think about this particular problem. So all of these questions from the coach are basically just bring you back to the problem and just to help you continue. And then maybe if you're stuck and you can't think if you're not talking anymore and you can't think any other concerns or points on your worry, your coach is just going to say, keep worrying. So tell me more. Go back to the worries that you already talked to me about. So that is basically the whole role of a coach. It is to do very little talking. Your worry coach is not there to provide solutions. Your worry coach is basically just to lead you through this and keep you voicing your concerns, voicing your worries. That's all. That's it. So if you decide to go that route, it's very important that you let your coach know the role that is expected. So one thing that might come up is if your coach happens to get off track with this, it's going to be up to you to remind your coach that the role is just to ask questions, just to keep you worried, not to be saying things like, oh, me too, or yeah, I've had situations like that, so I understand. That's not the role. That's not what is expected. So it might take a while to work this out between you and your coach, but I think once you set up the expectations and you've talked about it and maybe tried it a few times, like anything else, you'll be able to work through those difficulties and be able to perfect the relationship and the work between you and your worry coach. I think for me, I think the easiest way for me to do this is either 1 or 2. That's just a personal preference. So I think I'm going to go that route. But the idea is that you're implementing a way that is going to be most helpful to you. The next thing that you want to be prepared for is that during the day, you're going to have, at least initially, and even as this is ongoing, but you're going to have maybe other worries that you haven't been dealing with or you just haven't scheduled into your worry time. They're going to come up during the day. So when this happens, you want to postpone those thoughts. You want to hold on to the thought and you want to just keep it and know that, okay, I'm not going to think about this right now, but I'm going to add that to my worry time. So if that means physically writing it down so you don't forget what that concern was, and obviously if it's something that's very prevalent, you probably won't have any trouble going back to it. But the idea is, as these concerns come up during your workday or during any other times that you have not designated, you want to stop. You want to hold on to the thought either by just mentally taking note or physically taking note and saying, you know what, I'm going to add this to what I worry about during my designated worry time. So that's how you want to confront other worries that haven't maybe yet been tackled during your worry time. As they come up, postpone it and then add it to your worry time. Now, one little caveat to that is if it's a problem that has surfaced that has a quick solution, then you don't have to wait to deal with it, because clearly problems are going to come up that maybe can be solved in the moment. So just keeping in mind that that's going to happen. This isn't about avoiding every undesirable situation or every type of problem, because those are going to surface all the time. So if there is something that comes up, even if it is a worry, but you have an immediate solution, go ahead and embrace that. But the thing is, you don't want to spend extra mental energy going over and over a worry, because that's going to really defeat the whole purpose of trying to manage the anxieties. And in another article that I read, it talked about how really the whole act of worrying is really an attempt at problem solving. But in many times what we find is we don't have exact solutions, because often these worries are about things that are unknown to us, or uncertainties. We don't know how something's going to be played out. We don't know all of the specifics about it. So these are things that don't have immediate solutions, and really there's not much that we can do with it. In this article, it also talked about how chronic worriers, so people who are chronically worried, they're always going over the what if this happens or what if this doesn't happen, and they play over something in many different ways in their mind, and that's when that becomes really an anxiety that's overwhelming and can even be paralyzing to a person. And that's what we want to try to help manage and prevent. But of course, if it's a problem and there is a very obvious action and solution right there, then you go with it. But if there's not, and it's taking mental energy, that's when you want to add it to your worry time and just schedule it in and say, this is what I'm going to tackle mentally when it is that designated time to do so. So this is just going to help to develop a sense of comfort, because you know that you're not just going to dismiss this. You know you're actually going to have time to handle it and think about it. But on the other hand, you're not feeding it. You're not giving more life to it than what it actually deserves. So you're not making it more prominent. You're not making it bigger, and therefore it's not going to take away from your mental and emotional well-being in the moment, because that's really what this is for. To wrap things up, I'd like to just kind of summarize what we talked about today. So really the big idea was that you don't want worries to consume you. So we want to be a little more mindful about the way we attack our worries. So have 1 to 2 times during the day that are designated where you are going to confront a specific worry that you have. This time again should be a time where you're probably not at work, because you want to be able to focus completely on your worry. And as you do this, you want to just look at all the different possible angles of your worries. Remember, you're not talking yourself out of the worry. You're not telling yourself that this is silly to worry about it. You're going to embrace any of those negative emotions that come about from this worry. And if it's still your designated worry time and you've gone over every possible point of this worry, then you cycle through them again. You don't want to stop until your designated time is over. Then once it is over, you want to transition out of worry time back into your normal daily routine, whatever you would be doing at that given time. And you can do this by taking deep breaths. You can even shake your shoulders and shake it off of your body, as it were. And that will help you to transition out of your worry time. And then after you've done this and you've kind of gone back and forth with this worry for a while, you're going to start feeling like you've tackled it. You've really thought about it so much that this worry that was a thing has been dealt with and thought about so much that it's no longer a thing. Also, you want to keep in mind that you're looking for quiet space and that you can do this by yourself just by thinking and writing down. You can also record into a tape recorder, or you can get a worry coach. And lastly, just want to remind you that as your worries kind of drift to you during the day, you want to just grab onto it and say, you know what, I'll worry about this during my designated worry time. So that way you're acknowledging that you have something that you do want to spend some mental energy on, but not necessarily in that moment. So it allows you to just be more mindful in your day, but still deal with things that are worthy of being dealt with. And then, of course, during the day, if something does pop up and it has an immediate solution and a clear solution, obviously you want to tackle it then, because things are going to come out. Our worry time are more for things, not limited to this, but they're really for things that maybe there's not a clear outcome, or maybe there are different factors and you just don't know how it's going to play out, and that's why it's a worry. But if something comes up throughout the day and you can take immediate action because there's a very obvious solution, then go for it. That's fine too. That does not have to be pushed in until your next worry time. So that's basically it, and I'm going to go ahead and close the show on that. I hope you are able to take something from this, and especially with by the time this show airs, I think many of us will be getting closer to returning to school. So as we start school and we start thinking about all those things that are coming at us or will be coming at us rather quickly now, let's use this as a strategy to handle those anxieties that we are going to meet. So that is it. If you do use the strategy of designating a worry time, I'd love to hear about it. Now, that's it. It's a wrap for episode 10, and it is a wrap for series 2. Fast forward. I can't believe it. That was so fast. That means that next week we are going to start a brand new series, series 3, and it is called, no surprise, Back to School. And I'm super excited because next week I have an interview because we're looking at rethinking homework and we are getting a parent's perspective. And that parent is the one and only Tiffany Polari. That's right, my twin, my sister. She is going to lay on her thoughts about all things homework related. So you do not want to miss that. That girl has a lot to say. We'll see you next time. Wait a minute. Wait 1 minute. Before you go, don't forget you can catch our show notes online at www.timetoteach.libsyn. That's libsyn.com. We're also on Facebook at Time to Teach. Don't forget to check out our Facebook group, Teachers for Effective Curriculum. And if you're an educator with your own podcast show, I invite you to join our brand new Facebook group, Teachers Who Podcast. Let's grow a community where we can network, problem solve, and discuss anything and everything podcast related. I'll see you there.